Hello everyone, we're starting the broadcast about meshes in QTM. So I'm Johannes Sverker and I'm presenting this topic from the field applications and support team. And together with me we have Daniel Thompson, also from the same team, who will answer your questions during the tutorial, the webinar. Just a bit about GoToWebinar. You have a panel where you can control things, you can hide it, and you can view things in a full screen. And most important, you can write questions at the bottom. So the topic of today is meshes and new feature that was added in the most recent release in QTM. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the feature, what it can do with static meshes and rigid body meshes, and also how you can share these files once you have them. And first of all, the files that are supported in QTM to import meshes are the AVI files. And there are some limitations. For example, there can only be a material on one side of a face, which I will show later when I make a mesh. And there can only be 4 faces on a row in an AVI file. This might seem a bit technical, but it kind of means that it can't be too complex. It won't really show in QTM. Also important to know that you can download AVI files on a lot of places on the internet. Then it's good to know that if you download a complex mesh, it may slow down QTM. There's no way for us to know. I mean, we don't control how they work. It's also important to check the licensing when you do that, and we have seen quite often that there are absolute paths in the, for example, the MTL files, which you then need to edit to make it work. Yeah, so let's go to QTM. And the first thing to know about this feature is that you save the meshes with the project. So if we go to a project on the computer, you see here the different folders, and you have a meshes folder. And here I prepared some with some object files that I will show. So you have to have all the files needed for the mesh in this folder for it to show in QTM. And the easiest way is often to copy all the files, and we'll do that soon. Yeah, to then have something to show, I wanted to, will not be a tutorial in this program, SketchUp, but I wanted to show that it's just quite easy to make a really simple object if you want to. So, and there are of course other programs if you want to use them. So now I'm just making a rectangle, and I'm changing the size of it to 10 by 10 meters. I think it did. And then I'm just using that tool to make it higher, and let's say that it's 3 meters high. And since we don't want this, I didn't really say what I was making. I was making a room, and we want to be able to see what's inside, because that's where we have measured things. So we delete most of the walls. Just select them and press delete. And then comes this that I mentioned before, that QTM only supports one of the faces. So, and that's in this case is the outside. And we want it to be the inside in this case if it's a room. So we reverse it so that we can make something put a material or an image on this side. So now we can put some material on it. So let's put some color on the wall, something kind of gray we can use. And then we can have something more nice on the floor, or some wooden floor here. So, and then finally, just to have something more, we can add an image to the wall. And I will use our logo. So I'll just put it on the wall like that, like that. And then I have a room here that we can export and import into QTM. So we then export and 3D model, and I save it there. I used the wrong. Here it is. Sorry. There, we need to save it as an AVI file, of course, because that's what we support. And let's call it room. And we go to options. Sorry, this was in Swedish. We want to use this triangulate just because that makes it always work in QTM, or more likely to work. It doesn't really matter for this simple one, but if you make something with a circle, for example, that's very good to use. And we want to export all textures, and we don't think we need to change that. And we export it. So now we then can go back to QTM. And if we go to project options, we then have this option to use static mesh objects. And these are for the whole project. So we can add the room that we created. So now I can then we have this option here, import mesh. But I will show you that you then actually have to do a bit more. So you can then import this, but that will actually only import the AVI file and nothing else. So we can see here we have only the AVI file here. So I need to go back to where I saved them. And I want to copy that, the MTL file, and this folder I can show it includes the floor and the logo. So we need to have that as well. So if we copy those two, and then we go back to our meshes folder and paste them so that we have them. Then we will get all the things that we want. You can then select this room object, and yeah, let's just import it like that, and then we'll look at the positioning and scaling afterwards. We then open this file, and you see that it's much smaller than we made it. I made it to be 10 by 10 meters, but actually there's no way to know in the AVI file which units that are used. So we always import, everything will be 1 meter. In the longest side will be 1 meter. So we need to scale it 10 times if we want it to be 10 by 10 meters. So we go back to this, and we scale it to 10, and we can also make it a bit, use this opacity to make it so you can see through it if you rotate. So now we have this room and as a background. And we can add more of these static meshes if we want to the same project. So I prepared, this was a test where they jumped from a box down to a force plate. So I made a small box as well, almost the same way in SketchUp. And now I've already prepared I know where to put it. So I can translate it from where the origin is in X, Y, and Z. And we don't need to rotate it, I know. And we want to scale it because it's about 45 centimeters. There. So now we have both a room and a box where he jumps down from the box. So this is one thing you can do with static meshes, and it's important to notice that these meshes are shown for all files in a project. So if I now switch to another file, which I will use to show the other feature, the rigid bodies meshes, you can see that the box and the room is still there. And in this case, actually, I don't want the box, so I'll remove that. Yeah, so the static, there's not that much more to show about the static meshes, but the rigid body meshes then, this is a way to add a mesh to any rigid body, 6-off body that you made in your file. In this case, there's a rigid body on the bike here. And this is found the bike to download on the internet. If we just add it like this. Now I don't know exactly what I did actually. I was not doing the right thing. I was going to, that was not where I was going to add it. We need to add it, of course, not to static mesh. Sorry about that. We need to go to the 6-off bodies, but this is on a file, so we need to go to reprocess to add it to this file. And here we then have the bike rigid body, and furthest to the right, sometimes it's not visible, but it's there. You have the mesh, and you double click on it to open the settings for it. And here you can then add your object. And we'll just add it now and see what it looks like. And as you can see, it's completely the wrong rotation and everything. And this is quite common. If you just download something, you don't know how it's rotated and scaled compared to what you want. So we then need to modify it. So I'll put that over there, something like this. So you can then right-click in the 3D view and get this menu and go to rigid body, change mesh of rigid body, and then select the one that you want to have the settings for the body. And as you can see, we need to rotate it. So let's start with that. So first we rotate it around the x-axis so that we have it straight up, and then rotate around the z-axis. And these are always rotated around the axis that it says. So, and to close that to be able to rotate, and now you can see that it's slightly on the side, and it's also too small. And one thing here to know this is that it's good to set the correct scale first before you do anything else, because when you scale it, you also change slightly the positioning depending on how it relates to the two origins relate to each other. So, and I happen to know that 1.7 was a good scaling for this one. And then you have to try where this is all, if you have made it yourself, you can probably know where the origin is, but it's a bit hard to find out from any file that you just download. So in that case, you just you have to try. So in this case, I think we'll go, has also have to be lower. So something like 0.5 meter. Yeah, so we can see that we're getting there. And of course, I have tried this before, so I kind of know where I'm going. But this is, if you don't know, you will have to try a bit before you get it right. So in this case, I know that something like this will look pretty good. So we then have the spike, and if we then play the file, we can see that it moves together with when the rigid body moves. In this case, it doesn't move that much because they're just tilting the bike slightly when they so. And yeah, so this can then be done to any rigid body that you have. I'll show another way, just another one. So in this case, we have a completely different file. I already added one mesh for a cube here that we was handling. And then in the other hand, we were measuring, they had a pen holding in that hand. So we'll add the pen, and I'll show you now that you don't actually have to reprocess the file to add a mesh. You just use this rigid body, change mesh from rigid body and pen. And then you select the ob file that you want. And this is actually a pen I also made in SketchUp, a really simple one. And these are actually the scaling and everything is what I want it to be. So you can then see that you get the pen directly, and you don't need to reprocess it. And yeah. So it's very easy to just add a mesh if you have a rigid body in your file, if you want to show the object that it's actually measuring. Yeah, and finally, just to show that you can actually have this file is already prepared. You can have the same ob file can be used many times, of course. So in this case, we have 3 drones and 3 separate rigid bodies, and each of them, we look here, we can see that each of them use the same one, so drone custom. If we look at another rigid body, rigid body, we can see that it uses the same mesh. So you can use that, and of course use individual settings for each rigid body. Yeah, so if we go back here, then just a bit about how to then share this, because the important thing, as we saw, is that if we go back here, the files, the mesh files, are only stored here in the project. So even if you add them, as we've done here, to a QTM file, we only save the name of the mesh file. So to be able to play it on another computer, you need to copy the whole. You need to have the mesh file included. So the ways to do that is, the easiest way is to, of course, is to share the whole project, and then you will always be able to open it and see exactly what was there, and that is actually required if you have a static mesh, because that's only saved in the project options, nowhere else. And also then for rigid body meshes, there are two alternatives. If you don't want to send the whole project, you can actually just share the QTM file and have the mesh file just next to the QTM file. It will then find the mesh when you try to open it. And you can also copy just data folder and meshes folder and share those two folders together. Then QTM will also find the mesh, even if there's no project at that place. Yeah, and then just as we seem to have quite got some time here, I will just show another way you can share things with other people without having a QTM file, is this feature that we have to export an AVI file. So then here you can then create an AVI file from whatever is shown in QTM. And let's use this 720p, and it will then downsample it if you want to another frame rate, because that's when you play it, you don't need to have like this, probably like 100 hertz or something. You can just use 30 hertz, and I've used a codec to make it smaller. And if we then press OK here, I was going to show one thing, sorry. We do it again. Like that, 720p, and then you can actually preview and see what it will look like. So this is what will be in the AVI file. I will look, and then we press OK. And let's make a new file. And we'll then play the file back and record the AVI file. So if we then, and as you can see, I saved it here in the data folder, so we can just play it if I just put it on the right screen. So just a way to show that you can share things with people without them having QTM. It's just to show what you have. So I think that's what's about it. That from this, I can just see. I will just say that the next webinar that's coming up next week is about conventional gate model 2. As you can see, it's presented by Nils Betzler and Fabien Leboeuf. But yeah, now we have some questions. One question here: are there plans to add more mesh file types like STL? At the moment, there are no plans to add another mesh file type. No. So the answer is, in this case, no at the moment, but things might change. So if there's any other questions, please write. And yeah, there was another question here. An idea where to get good AVI files for free? Yeah, that one is a bit tricky. There are the thing is the for free part is the hard thing, I would say. For example, in SketchUp, there are this 3D warehouse where you can go. Just So SketchUp isn't actually free. I'm just using a trial at the moment. The Pro version isn't free. So these are kind of free, but it's a little bit hard to know about the licensing. So that's the way, and it's the same on most websites. For example, I used Blend Swap to find some that, for example, bike, but that's actually, it's free, but I need to mention, it's mentioned later in the presentation that it's made by someone. So I wouldn't say where to find free. It's very hard to say. Yeah, and I think I mentioned in the beginning which version you need to use this import meshes, and it's the latest QTM 2020 that is required. Then there is a question: can static and meshes linked to rigid bodies intersect, overlap? Yeah, there is no. I mean, trying to think here if I can show that. I mean, yeah, I can just move this. So the mesh can just move through another mesh. So let's move this wall here. Just thinking, how far is that? It's about 4 meters. Let's see if I manage to select the right translation here. We can move this and click apply. Yeah. So as you can see, in this case, it just the rigid body meshes just fly. They just fly through the static mesh. I think that was the question. If it wasn't, please ask again. So yeah, if there's no other question, I think that's it for this webinar.